Reading on the Job Fanfiction Review. What the fuck is all, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Reading on the Job. I'm your host, Will Martin, and this episode is a double feature where I'll be talking about two stories. One finished, the other is still in progress, and both are one of my favorite tropes in the Harry Potter fandom as far as fanfiction goes. They are canon divergent sortings.
Enough! It's not as though I've banned flying altogether, but don't tempt me.
Yes, that absolute cheese that is the Harry Potter side of fanfiction has this trope firmly encoded, and this will get you in about as much trouble with certain company as ships will, as everyone has their preferred vessel. In my case, it's alternate sortings, among other things, and the two stories we're talking about today both involve Draco Malfoy and Harry Potter being sorted into one another's house. These kind of things change the power dynamic between the two, and most of Hogwarts' student body conflict can be surmised in those year batches as the conflict between Draco Malfoy and Harry Potter. Imagine for a moment that there's no Voldemort, and it's just two different Quidditch Chads that have problems with each other. Something. Anyway. First, we have the finished story. The Right Sort, by JoveActually and RasingMyBanner. It's on AO3 at the links provided in the description below, and even though it's 162 chapters, it's one you'll find yourself binging if you have enough time or the availability between calls. Second, but in no way lesser, is the very interesting and still ongoing Lionheart by greenTeaCup. They've even got a Spotify playlist for that slow burn, dry-me-own story that starts with Draco Malfoy being sorted into Gryffindor, and from there ruining everyone else's old crotchety wizard plans by following for a bushy-haired witch with insistent morals. So, The Right Sort. This was a doozy, as it's very long. 162 chapters of fan work that's actually suspenseful and enjoying to read. Damn, son. That really just shows that the writers were very dedicated in bringing this story to life, and I thank them for it, as it's really good. There's some aspects to the Harry Potter fandom that's almost like Michael Bay movies, and I find myself to be kind of a fanfiction Michael Bay, in that I write cheese that's satisfying and full of explosions. With that in mind, Harry Potter as a fandom has a good number of stories that are really well done, regardless of how you feel about the original author. With that said, The Right Sort sets out its tale as a series of interviews on behalf of a ministry inquiry that we later find out in the story is all evidence and testimony submissions in the trial of Draco Malfoy after they find out he's not actually dead. We find out from the sorting hat in the first chapter that there is a complete resorting as compared to canon, with Harry going to Slytherin, Ron going to Hufflepuff, Hermione going to Ravenclaw, and the Golden Trio being completely split up. This, in the long run, comes to show them as more complete characters and forms friendships between them and other side characters that normally don't get that much limelight. The Harry Potter fandom is nigh dependent on the fact that JKR never really wrote these things about those characters outside of a list of names and a few appearance attributes. Now, the main thing to remember about Harry Potter is that it initially is supposed to be a children's story that aged with its readers. Its like will never come again, and there's always going to be this childishness to the world and setting, as it was at its core a kid's story. This is the ultimate test of your mileage may vary outside of asking someone which Star Trek that they preferred back in the before times. I could go on and on about the series itself, and I was only a year older than Harry was when it first came out. I was 12, and having this kind of story that followed you through the years was just one of those things that I think was a product of the unlimited free money that the publishing houses were getting at the time, and before the general affluence of the West collapsed with the dot-com bubble burst and then 9/11 happening. I've also got an episode of Conspiracy Corner in the works about one of the weird theories surrounding JKR and the story that has become so central to fandom that its shipper wars have influenced the behavior and taste of other fandom's shippers. Bang! Bad, Fujo! Bad! Everyone is interviewed, and I mean everyone, from the Sorting Hat all the way down to the other students, as the Ministry isn't completely incompetent in this story, just a bit corrupt. And when I mean everyone, everyone, including one of my favorite interviewees, Pansy Parkinson, who's just snarky and snide enough to give us the dish while also attempting to be upper-class mannered while doing it. Pansy is another one of those very underappreciated characters that gets used in the wider Harry Potter fandom that JKR didn't really do much with in the main story. And with that in mind, you've got the interview chapters, which are essentially the italic text of the interviewer and then the interviewee's response in normal text. And then interspersed between those, you have these interstitial chapters where you get some of the actual action in current time, or, you know, and current time as you would for the story. It shifts quite a bit between these interviews, and multiple people have multiple interviews, and then the actual interstitial chapters where you see Ron, Draco, and Hermione and Harry talking about things. And, you know, for the most part of this, though, the details, the nitty-gritty, are in the Ministry interviews. And, interestingly enough, Umbridge's name is completely and utterly redacted from the story. And, you know, I'm not sure exactly why this was, other than the fact that, you know, in general, the fandom has a hate for Umbridge that is actually justified. I've had some teachers like that before. Hem intensifies. You start to see the slow burn relationship build into this crashing wave that comes over the couple after Draco wins his freedom in a very intensely written court case. One of the things that the writers in this sphere have a problem with is getting a great idea and then trying to do a rewrite of books 1 through 7. I myself have that issue, and I've managed to fix it somewhat by going to flashpoints and tie-ins to tell the story of A Glance Askance. But if you have the talent and the drive to write 7 whole novels from a diverged canon starting point, you should probably start developing some other ideas, or possibly look into script writing. All them busters in Hollywood are on strike, and you yourself may just have the hot sauce in your own fridge right now. Now, The Right Sort does have a couple of other stories in it, as far as like a series, but those appear to just be tie-ins, and I think you can get the main thing from the main story itself. Now, while The Right Sort may have a goodly pace, and its stylings of interview chapter and interstitial active scene chapters make it much different than the normal fic that we're used to, it is also very different from our next story that we're about to talk about, which has a neck-breaking whiplash of a pace that will have you laughing, crying, and very much feeling. And our next tale, Lionheart by greenTeaCup. Now, it starts with a golden-haired boy, a bushy-haired girl, and a wish. I want to be the greatest Malfoy the world has ever seen! Quote it, because that line is what sold me on this kid. In the HP fandom, I very much identify with Sirius Black, being a bit of a daydreaming layabout, loyal to those who stick around, and it joyed me to see the way that Draco, without the presence of Lucius, turns into his cousin. Very much a mirror image in that regard. There are some differences, but you see the Sirius Draco connection very much in that. And it's a breakneck roller coaster of a story. We start off with Draco and his mother in the family crypt with Severus Snape in a conversation about how that his father is gone and what this means for him and his mother's survival in the wizarding world. This kind of puts you in the mood for the entire story, as you are immediately shoved with that Draco will have to make a choice one day. He's either going to have to choose the friends he makes or this legacy he's never known because of what other people expect. Really interesting read. Then we're off to the races, as this author is making a good pace with drawing the story out along the Hogwarts years of the trio, but with Draco making it a Gryffindor quartet. Year 1 starts out with the cracking of his dragon egg shell, and from then on, it's a continual burn of how he notices Hermione's morals and fire mirrors what he remembers with his mother and father in his early life before Lucius's death. At least that's kind of what I saw of it, and don't go all fucking Fujo on me now. It's more along the lines of wanting the kind of relationships your parents had if you had both parents in the home, not an Oedipus complex. As for Draco's relationship with his mother after Lucius's death, that's another source of this story's tragedy. It starts in the beginning, and it's really subtly hinted at, and then later on you just get hit in the face with it as Narcissa starts to slowly succumb to the Black family madness. Another one of my favorite tropes in the Harry Potter universe. It fits in really well with explaining the way that family acts. Some authors have it use it just as a simple tendency to be like kind of fiery-headed or have something a little off, but I use it in A Glance Askance more like it is a bloodline curse related to their use and mastery over legitimacy rather than anything else. Kind of like how in A Glance Askance you'll find that the Malfoy family is cursed to only have one male heir and no others continually, or that the Weasley family has a fucking goblin debt obligation on them that prevents them from ever retaining any kind of gold that they keep a hold of. Things like that. But in Lionheart, it's still kind of vague as to why this is going on ultimately, and I really hope this question gets answered. Since it's ongoing, it may get answered, and I really hope it does. And at the very least, we get to see more of Narcissa as written by greenTeaCup, even if she's heartbreakingly crazy. You really see this when Draco explains to Hermione why he never offered to have her visit in one of the later chapters. There's more exploration of the political system and parties and other things in the Wizarding world that makes this story much more immersive. The fact that you have Draco to balance Ron and Harry's fights rather than having Hermione just in the middle to try and make peace between the boys. It is now Draco and Hermione trying to manage their scattered-brained friends before, this one decides to get himself killed. And of all, both of these stories are really good. Ultimately, I'd urge you to check both of these stories out and give them a read. You won't be disappointed unless it's some kind of weird Fujo shipper war thing that has you attacking any vessel flying the Dramione flag with all fervor. And, well, really, that's it for this episode of Reading on the Job. See you next time.